Welcome to the Libido Lounge, where we focus on all things love, lust, and libido. We believe that fabulous sex is important to health as exercise and good food. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Lounge. I'm your host, libido expert, Dr. Diane, and I'm so excited about introducing to you my friend, my colleague, another naturopathic doctor, Dr. Aumatma Simmons. She's doing this amazing online event coming up talking about infertility and libido and how these things really intersect is what we're talking about today. So I'm
Mhm.
so excited to have you, Dr. Aumatma. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Diane.
Well, let's jump in. So, because we love to talk about libido on the lounge, can you tell us initially some of the things you see kind of relating libido to infertility? And I think, connecting some of the thing that we see around this vicious cycle that people get in,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, okay, we're trying to conceive and maybe it's hard. And then all of this pressure goes on sex and it goes on
Mhm.
intimacy in the relationship. So,
Mhm.
can we just dive in? Just let's get right to it on talking a little bit more about that vicious cycle that people get into?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people go into fertility thinking it's going to be fun and exciting and we're going to have lots of sex. And then they get into the reality. And the reality is what we're being told is that we should time our sex, that we should only do every other day during the fertile window. We're Because of the pressure of it, it becomes almost the antithesis of what we want, which is this easy, fun, lively experience. And then boom, we're in the fertility world. And everyone's transition is different, right? Like some people go into it and they're like, oh, we're going to have fun and we have all this energy and we're having fun and we're doing this. And that energy will last max 12 months, max. And that's literally the amount of time that doctors want you to be trying before they will do any testing. So the problem is it's almost a conflict of interest because doctors are like, well, try for 12 months. And in reality, if people knew going into it that the max amount of time and bandwidth and kind of energy that I can put into this is about 12 months, you would want to be doing things way sooner as far as testing and understanding what's happening and are there any blocks and should we work on stuff? Because if your timeline is 12 months, you're really setting yourself up for failure if you don't get pregnant in those 12 months. Because now, every month after that point where you've reached your internal limit is going to be extra. It's going to be, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And it's both partners, right? Like we often assume, oh, it's always the women that are giving up and don't really want to have sex and all that. No, in this case, it often flips the script. And honestly, I feel like men have a shorter bandwidth than women, right? They're like, I don't want to feel this pressure for 12 months. I don't even know if I want to feel this pressure for 3 months. So you'll feel like the male partner is kind of disengaging and is finding himself being distant and is like, oh my God, here she goes again, like calling me at work, trying to come home and have sex. Like, it's just not what I want to be doing with my time. So it's not that they don't want to have a child, they just don't want to do it under this circumstance of pressure. And I'm on her timeline and I'm like at her beck and call, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's just so many like contradictions that I feel like if we cleared up the misconceptions from the beginning, and if people had more awareness about what they're getting into, the pressure just wouldn't be there. And we would have a whole different dynamic in our sex lives if we didn't have that pressure.
Yeah, I love this intro to this conversation because obviously we're talking about fertility here. And also, I think this is just so easy to like extrapolate out and be like, oh, this is like fertility or not fertility. Sometimes this is just what happens with, with libido and with intimacy in general,
Mhm.
is like various things in life put pressure on or performance on, and,
Yeah.
and things change. But my question for you is this, because one of the things I talk a lot about in my work and then on this podcast is the concept of scheduling sex around, like, even say post having children or just being busy, right? It's so easy for that novelty and that dopamine and all those feelings of young love to wear
Mhm.
off. And
Mhm.
then without prioritizing sex in some ways, like scheduling it like our gym time,
Mhm.
oftentimes then it doesn't happen.
Right.
So my curiosity is like interesting of like, okay, so scheduling sex, and we do this in a way when we're not trying to conceive in a way of like fun,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
playful and prioritizing. But it is
Mm.
interesting then that oftentimes, like what I'm hearing is like when we schedule it because of trying to conceive and needing to meet that ovulatory window, then all of a sudden that schedule becomes pressure. So my question for you is like, is there like a mindset shift that people can begin to make to still, have to find that, of course, that ovulatory window if we are having, non help with like IVF or any of those other mechanisms, if, needing to find that ovulatory window to conceive, can we do that and schedule that and switch our minds so that it becomes almost like this scheduled sex that's done in this playful way without that intention?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest shift is like a small shift. And that shift is, instead of scheduling sex, schedule intimacy.
Yeah.
Schedule like we're going to be naked and sexy together, and it may or may not be sex. It may be just like playing or flirting or like cuddling or whatever. There's so many things besides sex that
Yes.
can lead to sex, but they don't have to. And I feel like that's the big one, is we have to have sex. And I feel like our culture has created this pressure, but science is not based in our physiology, right? Like if you have sex during your fertile window, and I define that by actually like multiple days before you ovulate. If you're having sex in that window, somewhere in that window, and you've optimized the egg and optimized sperm health, the sperm are going to stick around for 5 or 6 days. Matter of fact, they're going to be more available if you had sex before your egg was released, because they need to swim all the way upstream and find that egg. So if they're hanging out there already, it makes it a lot easier, a lot easier. So really, like if you're during that window, you don't have to be like, oh my God, it's positive, it's positive, it's positive, LH is positive right now. And it's like, okay, really, like, let's back off. And if the sperm are there, they're going to be there. It's okay. Like, there's no pressure. And like, the number of times, I would say the majority number of times that women will come back after everything is optimized, the number of times couples come in and they're like, we didn't even expect to get pregnant in this cycle because we didn't actually have sex when she was ovulating. And I'm like, yeah, but you had sex 3 days before that. So
Yeah.
all good. You're pregnant. Uh, and they'll try to fight it. They'll be like, oh, but no, like it couldn't have happened that time. And it's always the case. And like, and I say always in like not every single time, but a lot of the times that's the majority of our stories. And I feel like it's because there wasn't the pressure. It's because, oh, we're feeling each other and we're wanting to be intimate, and that's driving the sex equation more than it's the right time, right? And it's like, yeah. So if we can just separate those two, we get a lot more. And then once those are separate, then really we're focused on, okay, like what are the things that are going to help build intimacy? What
Mhm.
are the things that we talked about this on in your interview, the oxytocin, like what's going to get that oxytocin release? How do we get that bonding going? How do we get that oxytocin in men is amazing for sperm health. Like, let's get you oxidized, oxytocized. I don't know what the word is,
We're gonna
but
work on that.
yeah, that would be cool. So if we can really focus on something different, something else besides um the sex, the physical act of sex, then everything else that comes after is bonus. It's like, we're not focused on that. We don't even care if you have sex. And they're like, what? We need to have sex if we're going to have a baby. Yes. But your body knows what to do.
Yeah.
And you're like, if you're in tune, if you're feeling connected, if you're feeling that emotional bond, you're going to want to have sex. Like sex is the outcome of that. It's not the action that creates the intimacy. And I know it's a little different for men. Like men need physical sex to feel connected. But I think that driver for the desire for a connection is not going to be pressure. Like you're not going to pressure your man into wanting to have sex with you. Like it just doesn't work that way. And if you do want to pressure him, seduce him, don't force him into it, right? Like pressure him, like if we don't do this, we'll never have a child. Like that's not gonna help him feel sexy.
Right. Yeah.
So you
Yeah. I
want
find
to
it super useful.
yeah.
And I appreciate what you're saying too. I've been calling like sex dates. I've actually been calling them intimacy escapades and, talking about like, this isn't just about sex. It's about intimacy. It's about,
Mhm,
you have your emotional intimacy escapade. You have your cuddle
mhm,
intimacy escapade,
mhm,
and you can have your sex intimacy escapade. But
mhm,
yeah, so much of what I hear in that too is like, all right, so if it is, in this ovulatory fertile window time period, even if it's days before, some days after, and you are trying to conceive, can you even set that time, but take the pressure off and just be like, pretend like it's just like a normal intimacy escapade, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
flirt and tease and do
Yeah.
all the fun things, and eventually you'll get there.
And wear the sexy
Yeah.
lingerie and do the things that you would do when you first met, right?
Yeah.
Like when sex was still hot. Do
Yeah.
those things. Because I feel like it's really easy to get into the groove of like, oh, we just need to have sex. Like
It is.
just have sex. Just come on, just do it. And like that just feels, it doesn't feel good ever,
Yeah.
but specifically around fertility, it's not great. The other thing that I've found really helpful is for women to stop monitoring their ovulation and let the partner do it instead.
Mm,
And the male partner in charge of monitoring the fertile window, they're really good at it. Once they learn how to do it, they're really good at it. And it puts him back in his masculine driver's seat to initiate sex. So now she's no longer the one that's like, time's ticking, let's go. Now's the
right.
time. Instead, he is initiating and he doesn't need to mention anything about it's your time. Like, I just want to have sex and I'm initiating it and I'm in the driver's seat. So now he's empowered to be in his masculine instead of the woman being in her masculine while trying to be feminine.
That is, I think, my favorite thing we've said today so far. I love like there's so many layers of that. Like you said, it's like not only taking the pressure off, but putting the man in his masculine and giving him that power to provide, and letting a woman soften into her feminine and not have to worry and stress. There's layers upon layers. It's
So many
such a
layers
gem. I
there.
love it
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
What about, so are there any sort of like myths around fertility and conception that you feel like are really important to break down when we're having this conversation?
I think we've talked about quite a few of them, the ones specifically around sex. And I think the timing piece is really key because I feel like we drive that home so frequently. You go to your OB, the first thing you're going to hear is, well, are you timing sex?
Yeah.
It's like the worst advice ever. Like, should you only have sex when you have the LH surge? That seems so ridiculous to me.
Right.
And like, it's putting all of your eggs into that one basket that is the LH surge. And unfortunately, LH surge doesn't always mean ovulation. It is literally one hormone out of the many hormones that are happening. So I think that's the first myth. The
Yeah.
second one is around the age piece. And I think that that adds to the pressure. It's the whole like, oh, the latest is at 32, our fertility starts going down a hill. So it's not 35 anymore, it's 32. And you're too old, your eggs are too old. It's like so many things around aging that we're just not a culture that likes aging, period.
Yeah.
But when it comes to fertility, we have all these myths that are truly myths. The idea that fertility declines at 35 came out of churches in France in the 1860s that observed that women were not coming in to get children baptized after the age of 35. So they created this idea that at 35, fertility must go to shit because women don't come in to get their kids baptized after that age.
Wild.
1800s. And like 1800s in France, what was happening? A lot of stuff that was killing women before the age of 35. So like were women even around that much after 35? So there's a whole like issue that I have with where that came from. Science has actually not verified this.
Yeah.
Yes, IVF outcomes tend to go down. Yes, our hormones are shifting. There's a yes, 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 yes. I'm not the person that's going to be like, oh, you can get pregnant in your 50s. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like be realistic, but really have an analysis that is based on your body and your hormones and your aging profile, your ovarian aging profile, which now we have tests for. So do that first instead of, oh, I'm 37, so now it's going to be really hard for me. Like, who knows what that? I was 30. I got pregnant at 37 on our first try, and it was a first try, quote unquote, after a year of prepping my body, a
Right.
year of him working on his stuff. Like, wasn't like, oh, we magically got pregnant. It was literally like, let's click all of these things into place before we even start trying.
Yeah.
And my expectation wasn't that we got pregnant right away. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to be so hard, like prepping for those 12 months. Um, but I think it really goes to say, like, if we're able to prep our body and we come out of this mindset of the age and I don't have enough time and I'm running out of time. So every cycle is that much more pressure, right? That just adds to all of what we're talking about as far as pressure goes. And it's just not worth it. So I think that's the second big myth. And the third one that's kind of mixed in with all of this is testing and really knowing what's happening with your fertility. Is your sex drive affect is it a reflection of stress or is it a reflection of hormones or a little bit of both, which happens often? And being able to navigate that without the shame and guilt and like anxiety around all of it, but instead being like, hey, your testosterone is over converting to estrogen. That's a problem. And let's just do something about it. And it's okay that at like the number of women that are like, you fixed my sex drive. I feel amazing. And it's like it's so simple
Yeah.
sometimes. And it's going to go a long ways in supporting your fertility because those hormones are interdependent and they're influencing what's happening in your body through every part of the fertility cycle. We don't talk about it often, but testosterone increases 2 to 3 days before estrogen spikes, before the LH surge.
Right.
So the instant, like if your sex drive, your cervical fluid, and your ovulation surge are all synced, that's optimal fertility,
Yes.
right? Like all of it is happening in sync, in synchrony with each other. That's telling me you are in an optimal state because all of your hormones have clicked into place. And very infrequently, when people have that, do they not get pregnant. But if they don't have that, or if they're trying to override it, the number of women that are like, oh, I don't ever have cervical mucus. Like, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, like, we're not going to just shove that under the rug and move on. It's like, that's a major indicator that things are not quite where they should be, and we can do something about it.
Well,
Um,
that's why I'm so excited about your upcoming Beyond Infertility Summit, is because I know this is like, only like the tip of the iceberg, like what
yeah.
we're going to be talking about, right? So it's like, the hormones, the cervical mucus, all these things, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is an online event that Dr. Aumatma is throwing. It's coming up basically about a week from when you guys are listening to this. So there'll be information in the show notes about how to register. And I would really encourage people, remember, it's called Beyond Infertility, because we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be on there talking about libido. We're going to be talking about all sorts of different things beyond infertility. It's also about your health, your well-being, these sorts of things. So even if you're like, well, it's not really where you're at right now as far as infertility, there's going to be so many gems that you will pick up like we did today. Is there anything else you want to let people know about as far as that event is concerned?
I love it. It's going to be free. It's 49 plus experts, just like Dr. Diane. And there's like masterclass series going alongside of it. There's just so much that we have spent time building. It's it's going to be incredible. And it's just a big old party.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
come on over.
Yes.
Come party with us.
That's right. We're going to have so much fun. And I want to also encourage you guys, please remember that the end of this year, we're inviting our top guests back for a longer, deeper dive. So if you love this conversation, make sure you take extra effort to send it to your friends, to download it, to share it, because that's going to rate Dr. Aumatma high. And then I get to invite her back for more time. So
Oh, that's fun. That's
and
fun.
yeah, super fun. And thank you so much for being here with me and with us today. It's been always, just like always, a pleasure and enjoy chatting with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Remember, everything you need to know about working with Dr. Aumatma, as well as her upcoming Beyond Infertility event, is in the show notes for you. And this is Dr. Diane reminding you to always stay classy, always stay sexy, and always remember to be a little badassy. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.